So this is Brodie's take on the whole situation with Derrick Jaxn. Now, what I'll say is this right here. I don't know all the details. I heard the story that he told. I somewhat believed him. I didn't completely believe him. But one thing I will say is stop saying that men are guilty just because they look nervous when they're telling a story. Like, women have way too much power when they're controlling social narratives, that even if a man is completely 100% right about what he's saying, there's still a chance that people are just going to believe that woman because she has a pussy between her legs. And because you understand that as a man, sometimes you say nothing and just let things roll over. And sometimes it's a situation where you can't just say nothing. And in those situations where you can't say nothing, you don't know what you say is going to be further taken and misconstrued and twisted against you. So it's one of those things where we just need to be more honest and more open about it, and less judging things based off of appearances and more judging things based off of facts, judging things based off of the consistency of the narratives and the stories that are presented to us. But what I'll say is this. This is one thing that I've noticed with Derrick Jaxn. I saw his wife. Now, if she's attractive to you, that's dope. If she is, that is fire. You know, she cute to me. But what I will say is I've seen this plenty of times. Like, I've been in situations like that. This is why when I talk about the biology first approach, I always advocate for a woman to be the peak level of attractiveness for her body type and for her appearance and things like that. Because what will often happen is, even if a woman is submissive, sometimes a man will take a woman in that is submissive, that he's not that attracted to, just because, you know, he doesn't have that at the time. And for Derrick Jaxn, I think it has more to do with his brand. You know, I think it has more to do with his brand to deal with a woman like that. I guess it's like a guy who makes, you know, is always talking about BBWs in his songs, and then he ends up with a slim woman or something like that. I don't know, right? But it's one of those things where, because he's talking about stretch mark lover and all this other stuff, that he needs to find like more of a plain Jane looking woman. But that is a swole, attractive dude. Pause. That it is what it is. He has his choice of whatever woman he wants to deal with. And I've seen situations like that before. I've seen situations where guys were, you know, just general, conspicuously just attractive guys dealing with women who may be out of shape or whatever it was. And oftentimes what is perpetuated here is a Madonna whore complex, right? Where a man will find a woman who he believes will be loyal to him, to lock it down, or maybe she does what he wants and she's submissive with him, but he doesn't really desire her on that level. He isn't really all that attracted to her on that level. It's just a matter of she's there. And I've seen it before. It's just one of those things that happens. And usually when it happens, like a man will be in a situation where there's a certain balance between how much you desire the other person and how much you feel they desire you, right? So especially, like, well, sometimes if you don't feel like you desire that person enough, then the ego gratification that you get from how attracted you are to them isn't going to be enough to cause you to be satisfied based off of how high your level of self-esteem is. So that's the thing right there. It's like, it's going to be based off of how high that level is. If it isn't high enough, then you need a person who has a certain level of attractive in order to make sure that you feel validated enough to not need something outside of that, right? And if your self-esteem is real high, then you could probably be with someone who is not as conspicuously attractive without feeling the need to cheat, if they show a certain level of desire for you. But the truth is this: if you're in a situation where you don't feel desired by that individual, depending on how attractive they are, you know, if they're not as attractive, it's going to even increase your desire to step out, right? You know, feeling desired is a very important part, right? You know, the woman was ready to leave him. She was done with him, all this stuff. They was cutting each other off. She went far, far away, which means he wasn't getting no nookie. On his birthday, she was gone out of town. And she was like, you know, we're not having any plans to see him on his birthday. Like, things got that bad. Like I always say with the biology first approach, if you can make love, you can make up. I remember he was talking in a video saying how when he's under stress, he can't perform. You know, this is why the biology first approach is important. Stop just trying to talk these women's head off and trying to build these overly close friendships with women that destroy your sexual polarity before you get into a relationship, before you get into things sexually. Like, when you go about things from that approach, often what will happen is you're only going to be sexually attractive to that woman as long as she's emotionally attracted to you. And I know that sounds good to women, and I know that sounds good to some men, because if a man doesn't have sexual confidence, then a woman being sexually attracted to him based off of her emotional attachment is something that is going to be enticing, because he doesn't believe in his own sexual attractiveness at all. But the issue was this: if you have this type of mentality, this type of mindset, then the moment you're in a situation with somebody where you're not on the same page emotionally, you're going to be unable to use sex as something to pull you back in together, to reconnect. And then in that place of reconnection, you get to communicate and then rebuild the bond based in the sexual polarity and the masculine feminine dynamic. Sometimes when you're trying to communicate and over communicate things, and I've been guilty of that myself, when you're not in a place where a woman is submissive to your masculine energy, where she isn't opened up to you, oftentimes it's going to sound like you're beating her over the head with a bunch of information. It's going to sound like you're begging her. It's going to sound like you're trying to convince her, like you're trying to prove something to her. And it's just going to turn her off sexually even more. And when it turns her off sexually even more, it's just going to cause her to lose attraction. And as that attraction is lost, it's going to make her feel more justified in continuing that process of walking away. That's why certain people talk about like the no contact strategy and different things like that, because it builds a certain level of attraction, right? But it's one of those things where, that's why I think the biology first approach is so important, because if you don't have that ability to make love and make up, if you don't have that ability, and I'm not talking about being smoothed over when someone's being disrespectful and then just turning that into sex. I'm not necessarily talking about that. There's different types of make love to make up. But if you don't have the ability to do that at all, then you're kind of putting yourself in a bad position, to where the moment you have a disagreement or a dispute within your relationship, it's not going to be solved until the man decides to submit himself to the woman's social programming, because that's usually where her issue is coming from anyways. A lot of times the initial issue that causes the rift between a man and a woman is not actually anything that the man actually did wrong. A lot of times it's just a woman's perspective. A lot of times dating coaches these days and women's dating advice, like Derrick Jaxn, his own dating advice, which is the reason why I have I don't have so much sympathy for him because of this. But it's one of those things where his own dating advice, it teaches women to shit test men, not understanding, or maybe he does understand but doesn't care, that a woman shit testing a man is going to determine whether or not that man is high value or low value, right, in his own mind, right? And based off of that, he teaches women to go after the men who failed the test, basically. Like, he's teaching women to make a man prove himself, and after he proves himself, the man who proves himself, that's the man who she wants to be with. That is not how female nature works at all. That's not how female nature works at all. How female nature works is a man, and you know what? The man is the prize. I don't care what nobody say. Like, everybody can be the prize, but as far as, if you're dealing with somebody based off of a level of emotion, then how you feel about that person is more important than how that person feels about you. So it makes more sense based off of how a woman's mind works, that she needs to like K-Zag said, campaign for the position of girlfriend or wife, right? That's what she needs to prove herself for, that. Because she wants a man who's already, to a certain extent, established in his masculinity, established in his sex appeal, established in different things, a lot of times established financially. Not always, but these are different things that women desire, right? And when it comes to these things, a woman isn't going to help build a man up into these things. That to her, that feels like that's putting her into her motherly energy, that makes her feel like that's her son or her child, or her brother, and not not a situation that creates sexual polarity. But for a man, when it comes to dealing with a woman, a man will teach a woman different things in order to coach her up, to get her to the place where she can be the woman that he wants her to be for this particular situation. Because feminine energy, it does what? It molds, it bends, it compromises. Masculine energy is something that is strong, it's unwavering, it's unbending, it's stoic. It's something that is already set in its ways to a certain extent. And yes, change is good, change and growth is good, but these are just some things that happen. So when you're looking at the situation of the things that Derrick Jaxn teaches, that it's probably very possible that it could have been a situation where the thing that caused the rift between him and his woman was she probably shit tested him, and he either passed or failed, right? Now, based off of what he teaches, it puts a woman in a certain mind state where if her attraction is already wavering, then it could cause it to be fail if he passes the shit test, meaning as in he chose not to prove himself. Plus, that would also be reinforced by his own books, his own teachings. But then also, it could be a situation where he did exactly what his book said, and that further caused her to lose attraction for him, which caused him to be able to lose that rift and be unable to make love and make up. Because I think in most instances, irreconcilable differences are a matter of a lack of respect and sexual attraction. Most of the time, a lack of sexual attraction and a lack of respect is what leads to irreconcilable differences. That's what it really means most of the time. And if people are able to fix that, like I made a video about Make It Better by Anderson .Paak, if you're able to go back in and fix that, then a lot of those situations can be salvaged. Because in most of those instances, the things that lead to those irreconcilable differences, you're going to go through that same shit with the next person, honestly. Like, those cycles don't just stop on the head. There's certain mindsets, societal narratives, and propaganda that go about making sure that relationships end that way. So I just think it's important to have understanding and knowledge of different things, right? I do think that everybody can mess up. Those are real things. I personally haven't cheated, but I'm only 25, so, it is what it is on that. I think it's also a matter of sometimes a man will try to do what he thinks is right, buying into social programming, which is the social programming that he bought into was, men not putting a high value on making sure that the women that they're dealing with, they're high level of attracted to, right? And when you do that, you're rejecting your own ego, or not just rejecting your own ego, but the thing is this: we have to take into account the part that the ego plays in different aspects of our relationships and situations, right? Sometimes we will put our ego to the side because we're in survival mode, right? And what I mean by that is, let's say there are certain things that you're attracted to, certain things that you desire in a relationship, and in that process of having certain things you're attracted to and desire in a relationship, you will put yourself in a situation where, because of religion or because of societal pressure, you'll decide, okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to do the quote-unquote right thing, and this person is nice to me, this person treats me well, or this person values themselves, or whatever it is, or value-based dating. And what you're going to do is you're going to go ahead and take that person seriously, although your initial sexual attraction to them is not that high. And when you try to go about doing things the quote-unquote right way, what'll often happen is it'll lead to situations where you're going to build up a certain level of resentment. That resentment will build up into entitlement, and that entitlement will build up into an opportunity where you feel like you deserve to step out. That's how most cheating happens. Most cheating doesn't happen because people are just duplicitous. Most cheating happens because someone puts themselves in a situation where, in the midst of the situation that they're in, they're not really doing it from a place of intrinsic desire. They feel like the loyalty is something that they're giving the individual and something that they just want to do because they wouldn't be open to the possibility of being non-monogamous or polyamorous if they really had those inclinations. And because they aren't open to the reality of that or the possibility of that, they kind of repress their sexuality, and they're not honest with themselves about the different things they feel or the different things that they want. So they often put themselves in a situation where the taboo exacerbates the different level of sexual desire. And when the taboo exacerbates the different levels of sexual desire, a person will get to the place where it'll boil over. The floodgates will break. You know what I mean? The dams will break. All right, these are things that happen in relationships all the time, and people need to understand that and stop overlooking certain things when it comes to relationships, right? Like, as a man, like, yes, you should make sure that the woman you're dealing with is attractive enough to you to where, especially if you're a monogamous type of guy, make sure she's attractive enough to you to where you wouldn't feel the need to sleep with other women, right? Make sure that your ego is satisfied with that. And if your ego takes way too much to be satisfied, then maybe you need to do some soul searching, right? Maybe you need to do some work on yourself. But having a healthy ego is just being realistic with yourself, because if you leave the ego out of how it is you go about dealing with somebody, then what we have to understand is that the ego is a social survival instinct, right? The ego is a social and emotional survival instinct. And I'm saying this pretty late into the video, but the ego for a man often works like this. A man's ego is based in his dominance. It's based in his, in the general view of his masculinity. It's viewed in his sexual desirability and his sexual power, and those different type of things. His ability to be dominant in his environment. But why? One, a man wants the ability to gain sexual access so that he can have children. But a man wants sexual power and sexual desirability and to feel sexually preferred, so that in the time where a woman is ovulating, he will be the one to get her pregnant. This isn't something that is just a fragile male ego thing. This is something that just permeates society as a whole, and human civilization, and just human nature, right? And for a woman, her ego would mostly be wrapped up in listen, and I'm gonna break something else down too, but I'm gonna get back to it. A woman's ego is primarily built off of her assumed perception of innocence, and her youth and beauty and what that influences men to do or to sacrifice. And the reason behind this is this. Let's say a woman is in an environment where it isn't civilized and she needs to maintain she needs to survive. The way she's going to survive for most women is not going to be based off of the merit of her own strength, her own backbone, her own ability to go chop wood and do all this extra wild shit. No, it's going to be based off of her ability to find a man who sees her as virtuous and who sees her as youthful and beautiful. And because of that combination of things, he is a man who is willing to take care of her. So it goes like this. And this is where survival mode versus abundance comes in. I think this also plays into the Derrick Jaxn situation. So survival mode is where you're in a place where your self-esteem is low. And because of the low state of your self-esteem, it causes you to be in a position where you are going to not prioritize your ego when it comes to the things that you're looking for, or you are only going to prioritize your ego and nothing else, right? You're going to separate the Madonna and the whore. That's what happens. Or for a woman, it's going to separate the gent and the gigolo. You're going to separate the two because your ego, your self-esteem isn't high enough to think that you can get both in one package, right? Your self-esteem isn't high enough to think you can get both in one package. So you separate it. And based off of where you are or the things you feel like you have to offer, you're going to go after one thing in particular, right? So maybe Derrick Jaxn, his sexual self-esteem was either very low or very high when he chose the woman that he chose, right? I'm not saying she's not a beautiful woman. I'm just saying, let's just be real here. He doesn't look that sexually attracted to his woman. So it was either a matter of she was his Madonna and he felt like she would hold it down, which she may not have when they were broken up, which is, you can't put that on anybody. But at the same time, he also may have been in a place where his self-esteem was so high that he was able to deal with a woman who wasn't as attractive to everybody else, but was attracted to him. That's a real aspect of it too. But the difference is this. When it comes to survival mode, when you get to a place of abundance, that's where you want to integrate those things in, or you want to experience the other side of what it is that you desire, right? So like, let's say you're a man and you're dealing with a woman from a Madonna complex, the Madonna of the Madonna whore, and when you're dealing with her, you're building your finances, you're building your looks, you're building your body, you're building your mindset, you're building your mentality, you're building your goals, you're building your vision, you're building your sex appeal, you're building your sexual skill. Along this process, there are going to be women who come along who are purely sexually attracted to you. Now, the way Derrick Jaxn teaches, he doesn't teach to go the pure sexual attraction way. And because he doesn't teach that, it causes a man to be in a situation where he may experience a certain level of sexual jealousy, right? And this is what will happen. He sets himself up by going through that process and not going the biology first approach. That if anything happens that makes him feel like his woman doesn't desire him, then he will need the validation of another woman sexually in order to boost his self-esteem and to maintain the level of his ego, right? Now, once you reach a certain level of abundance, now those women who you didn't think you could pull, or those women who you didn't think you had access to purely off of sexual attraction and desire, are going to come along. And some of it's going to be purely sexual attraction and desire. Some of it's going to be clout pussy. That's true too. But when that comes along, it's very hard for a man to not take a woman up on that unless he's just been there and done that already. And I think Derrick Jaxn probably already has been there and done that already. But it's just one of those things where after that is presented to you and you've been doing what you felt like was the quote-unquote right thing for so long, now you're in a position where it's like, damn, you earned it. So like he was talking about